Thank you for joining us. This is Dankalia in Focus. In today's discussion, we will speak about the recent article by Mr. Steve Walker on Atlantic Magazine. Steve Walker is an American diplomat who has been serving as charge d'affaires in Asmara, Eritrea until July of this year. Among many bold statements Mr. Walker has made is urging the Eritrean government to implement political and economic reforms, and also meeting with Eritrean opposition groups in diaspora. My guest today is Mr. Ahmed Mohammed, president of EANC, and then we will discuss this article with Mr. Ahmed today, and we will highlight some issues that was presented by Mr. Walker. Thank you, Mr. Ahmed. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Brother Shehim, for putting together this program. We are, like Shehim had mentioned, we want to go into the articles by the American Charge d'Affaires in Asmara, Mr. Stephen Walker. Among many things that Mr. Walker had said in this Atlantic magazine article, two things have come to my mind, and I would like to share those two things with you. In my opinion, Mr. Walker is a rare diplomatic figure in this day and age, especially for those of us who view and had terrible experience, humanitarian violations, and what has been going on in the past 31 years in Eritrea. So this is very courageous of him to write this article. It shows his character, and I know he is no longer the ambassador or the charge d'affaires in Eritrea, and this is not this opinion he wrote is strictly his own opinion. It's not U.S. Department's policy per se, but it's really very strong in terms of the foreign policy that we have been following by the U.S. or other international community. So one of the key things that came to my mind when I read this article was he's highlighting the engagement versus isolation, which is very unique, especially in Eritrea. I would say for the European Union have been trying to understand this regime and try to engage the regime to come out from its shell, so to speak, to improve the human rights. Perhaps if we engage this tyrannical system in Asmara, we perhaps will have a change in heart or something on the ground that will help improve the governance or the human rights abuses of Eritreans. This policy have proven deadly, in fact, for the Eritreans as a result of the soft approach by European Union and other international community towards the Eritrean regime. The Eritrean regime was emboldened. In fact, grew as large, one of the worst destabilizer in the region, not only on the human rights violation of Eritreans. So this article was very important for those of us who are democratic opposition against the tyrannical system in Eritrea. So this is one of the key things that I took from Chargé Stephen Walker, and I would like to see what the engagement, for example, the engagement that I was talking towards the Eritrean regime. For instance, if we look at my next slide here, Eritrea, this is one of the cruelest thing that the international community, specifically the United Nations, had done to the Eritrean people. In fact, Eritrea was given status as it was on October 14, 2021, UN General Assembly elected Eritrea to the UN Human Rights Council from the year this year to the next 2-year term. This is in fact slap on the face of the Eritrean people and the human rights advocates in the diaspora. So, as you can see, this is one of the tools that European Union and international community have been trying to appease the Eritrean regime. So in hopes of turning the human rights, but perhaps engaging versus the isolation, they chose to engage. In fact, this is one of the critical point that Mr. Walker has raised in this, that he's saying we no longer need to engage totalitarian regimes in order for us to improve human rights. He is suggesting that we need to stand with Eritrean people, with the justice seekers, and those who want to bring Eritrea to a democratic transition from its current dictatorial system. Another thing I want to show you here, Shehim, is the policy of development aid or foreign aid to Eritrea. This is a chart that shows European Union specifically having given Eritrea 36 million euros, and in the year 2021, I believe, to assist this.
If I may add, Ahmed, so you tell me the fairy tale version of Eritrea we've been hearing from some sources, like most of them are in the West, that Eritrea is debt-free, Eritrea is democratic, or some all that stuff is a lie. Okay.
Yes, I will show you that chart. In fact, the chart that you shared with me earlier, that shows here's the national debt from 2017 to 20, the projection from to 2027, 3.7 billion.
3.8 billion dollars in debt.
Yes, in debt. So again, yeah, you mentioned those who are sympathizers of the regime try to hide this kind of crisis in terms of Eritrea's economy. The other thing I want to highlight is, of course, as an Afar, as Eritrean Afar, as indigenous people, we have seen the first-hand treatment of Eritrea's tyrannical system towards our indigenous people, the Eritrean Afar in the country. The chart, the document that you see here is by the UN Commission of Inquiry that was released in 2015 and 2016. In fact, the investigation found that Eritrean government have committed crimes against humanity and crimes of persecution against the Eritrean Afar people since its inception. It goes to say the Commission of Inquiry stated the actions by Eritrean authority may be construed as an international acts to dispossess them, the Afar, of the ancestral lands, their livelihood, and their culture. This is in the document. It says that the killing of the Afar ethnic group and reports of existence of mass graves have triggered their displacement for their land within the country and across the border to Ethiopia and Djibouti. This has posed great difficulty to their livelihood as they depend on their traditional land for subsistence as indigenous ethnic group. It goes on to add that the land traditionally belonged to the Afar was seized by the Eritrean government in a land reform, and this is done without the consultation or on the impacted Afar communities. So this shows to tell you the regime's nature as one of the worst human rights abusers in the world. And this is why it is absurd to see UN Human Rights Council is awarding Eritrea to sit on its Human Rights Council. So
for me, UN Human Rights Commission is just a joke. There's so many dictatorships in there, and it's not. I don't even want to call it human rights organization. Yeah. And another thing that Mr. Walker highlighted was really like the fairy tale version. Another fairy tale version I'm going to mention here is like Eritrea. In Eritrea, everybody is equal. All ethnic groups are treated equally, and the one part of the I don't know if you could show us that later, but on the article, Mr. Walker particularly mentioned that Orthodox Tigrinya speakers are in charge, even though the government is trying to. They not like they usually do. They limit their supporters like Eritrea. Every religion is restricted. We know there's only like 4 religions only allowed, right? Mm-hmm. And every other religion is not allowed in that country. But the problem is what they tell us and what they tell, and they mislead. They probably mislead the world too, but they particularly their supporters or other religions, like in the West or something. They try to tell you this version that everybody's equal, and then we all we all sing in kumbaya or something together.
Exactly.
And this guy knows because he lived there for 4 years. He talks to the people, because this kind of people, when they go to the countries, they try to study their country as much as they can, and they talk to a lot of people, gather a lot of information. They're not going to put their name on something that's not true, and I believe them 100%. And we know, because guys like you, Ahmad, and opposition groups have been saying this all along for years and years and years, right?
Absolutely.
So this is actually proving all that we've been saying right, and and good on it.
Yes, kudos to the former charge d'affaires of Eritrea. This is in fact one of the key points in his article. Perhaps some of the groups has this is very an eye-opening remark by a former diplomat to have studied the nature of this regime. What he's saying is absolutely right, and this is what we have been saying as ethnic group that have been discriminated and marginalized, and whose livelihood has been destroyed, whose identity is under existential threat, and this validates our grievances, because we've said from the beginning, this is an Eritrean state from the get-go, from its inceptions, have molded the statehood on protecting the rights of or to protect the status quo and marginalize those people like the Afar and the Kunamas and the Belanes and the other nationalities who are not Tigrinya. Those marginalized ethnic groups have been crying for so long that this regime, not only a dictatorship for all, but has specifically targeted those of us who are indigenous, who have been occupying the most strategic land in Eritrea. We have been victimized because of our geostrategic existence, because of our natural resources, because of our ethnic identity. And this is what I was just showing you about the report that was released by United Nations Special Rapporteur. So to Mr. Walker's credit, we have been engaging with the Eritrean opposition groups, telling them to what is the experience of their fellow Afar and other nationalities have been, and we have been dismissed for so many years because they think we have a vendetta against the Eritrean state. But in fact, the reality on the ground is this is a Tigrinya-led government, dominated from the government all the way to private sector, all the way to the national language, in terms of, for example, for the Afar now, the Afar language is barely existent. Every time the Afar want to communicate, they have to learn the Tigrinyas. This means their culture, their ethnicities, and their way of life has to be completely assimilated to the Tigrinyas. So to the Tigrinya language and culture. Just this week, we were talking about, past week, we were talking about the destruction of our way of life in the fisheries. So we reported about 100 Afar fishermen were kidnapped and rounded up and taken to prison. Their crime is basically implementing their economic way of life they have been doing for years and thousands of years prior to Eritrea's existence. So the regime is deliberately attacking Afar culture, Afar identity, Afar geography, Afar political, cultural, customary laws in order to advance the systematic displacements of Afar people. Let me just focus on the constitution, for example. In any country, when it comes to existence, the first thing they do is write a constitution, or because in a state like Eritrea, diverse ethnic background, the diverse religious and society, you have to take into consideration and what Eritrean regime from the get-go, from the start, have made that Eritrea needs to have one culture, one people. In fact, there's a motto that says "Hada Libi, Hada Hizbi," meaning one heart, one people. This is, in fact, a systematic way of assimilating others to take away the other nationalities' rights in favor of building one country with one people. And as opposition groups, we have been struggling with our own political opposition groups that want to see a transformation, but ignore these grievances and do not want to implement the grievances and the principles of equality, principles of self-determination, for example, for the Afar and other nationalities who see themselves need to protect their political and cultural and economic history and political economic rights in the country. So for us to call ourselves opposition groups and yet deny these rights to fellow Afar and fellow Eritreans is in fact what I want to highlight and make sure this article is in fact an eye-opener to those who deny the existence of discriminatory policy in Eritrea.
I really would like the others to know is when we talking about the grievances of far, we're not really dismissing the grievances of there's so many Tigrinyas who just as abused and well, I mean, they live under like everybody in Eritrea except maybe about 5 or 6 people are really like under very, very bad condition. And
Absolutely.
so when we talk about the Afar grievances, and then we were mentioning what happens to Afar in particular, we don't mean it's not happening to everybody else. So I just want the fellow petition uh,
Absolutely. No one
members
is
to
saying that.
understand that
No,
we're,
no one
we're
is
with
saying that.
you. And
Yeah.
yeah. So they won't take it like in a wrong way or something, because we are okay. We know that Eritrea is like a system, a dictatorship that oppresses everybody, but in particular, minority rights are not respected, is what we say, and the minorities like
Indigenous,
Afar
right?
are oppressed way more. Indigenous Afars are really like they were in the verge of being
That
eliminated. I could say, you know, and their language and their culture, they lose everything. Like they have no control over their land. They have no control over their livelihood. They have no control
the
like
identity.
anything. You just identity as well, right?
Yeah.
So we're not really dismissing the other Eritreans when we say this, but we are like our
Yeah.
case is different. Is what we're trying to say, right?
Well,
Yeah.
that's
Thank
what
you.
every that's yeah. Thank you, Shahim. But that's what every
Yeah.
regime does. Every totalitarian or worse regimes do in terms of uh, assimilating the culture. This is not something new. This is what the Stalinistic ideology came from. Is to basically declare a nation, declare to purify a nation, or this is what far right groups do when it comes to the indigenous people's resources, their rights, their identity. So the question is again, you cannot call yourself democratic opposition and hold on to those kind of ideology, disrespecting or discriminating or marginalizing other communities. This is the point that we need to share with our fellow opposition groups. And this is in
Basically
fact,
saying, well, listen to us, and then see what's happening to us at the same time. We know it's happening to a
yeah,
lot of, like, in general in Eritrea, but our case is, well, it's different because our existence is and
yeah,
our existence is in caution as a people.
yes.
So our case in this case is different. So,
The counter argument has always been is that once we remove Eritrean regime, we're going to take care of all these problems. This is one of the main things that we've been facing from the Eritrean opposition. They're saying, listen, we understand the Afar situation. We understand many others who are in the same situation, but this shows us a lack of understanding. In fact, you cannot write or you cannot implement something if you don't believe it within your heart. First of all, you have to acknowledge the victimization, the marginalization, the grievances, historic wrongs that have been committed against the people, the indigenous people. This is where we need to start. We need to start having an understanding or a draft constitution is a way to go, so that there won't be any conflicts once the regime is removed. This is the point that we are really struggling with. The key point for us as opposition is to agree in principle the rights of equality, like I said, the rights of indigenous people, the rights of self-determination, the rights of political autonomy, power sharing constitution that reflects Eritrea's diversity religiously, ethnically, geographically, and historically. If this is not taken into consideration by the so-called opposition group now, we're going to have conflicts. We're going to have irredentism. We're going to have secessionist feelings towards a population like the Afar. So this is where the key point, the takeaway point from this article is: number one, Eritrean regime need to be isolated, need to be put into corner, needs to be given severe sanctions so that thousands of Eritreans are not losing their life fleeing this totalitarian tyrannical system, including the Afar. And the way to go about is to have a common vision that will galvanize all the opposition groups. And on the article, the positive thing from the article is Chargé Stephen Walker is in agreement that he needs to help the Eritrean people, and the opposition, the American government, as well as the European Union, to need to stop their engagement policy with the Eritrean regime. This is one thing. The other thing is, like I mentioned, the opposition groups and the justice seekers of Eritrean diaspora need to understand it, to take really into consideration that the lives of their ethnic brothers and sisters, including the Afar, the Kunamas, and others, has values that new Eritrea, democratic Eritrea, will include their rights, and that rights need to be implemented or agreed in principles from today, not when we wait and the sudden death of Isaias Afwerki or the trouble from inside.
Another thing, like one more thing I got from this article, Mr. Stephen mentioned in this article, even to move within Eritrea, you need a permit.
Yes.
Like if you want to move from like a neighborhood or from one village to another or something, you need a permit, right? And everybody has to do the national service. Nothing wrong with national service if national service is for like a short period of time, and then he mentioned there's no development in Eritrea to mention now, like nothing been done in a like we've been saying that nothing, and then maybe there's like only country with there's no like internet access and stuff what we take here anywhere in the world, for matter of fact, for granted, right? And if you can discuss some of those things, since you've been following this for like
well, we're talking yes, thank you, and we're talking restriction of movement is one thing that foreign diplomat like Stephen Walker has experienced. Anywhere in the country, they cannot leave within the vicinity of Asmara, I believe, if they would try to travel 10 or a few kilometers away from Asmara. This is the United States
for
government.
Diplomats, it's the same thing.
This is what we're talking.
Even for a diplomat from the United States, he cannot freely move.
So, but as indigenous people, we are people who strive on freedom of movement. The nature of Afar are either on the sea or on the land. We need to move in order for us to survive as indigenous people. Freedom of mobility is one of the principles of United Nations Indigenous Charter or anybody's basic human right. This has been denied by Eritrean regime, and in fact, the Afar have been deprived of this for so many years. And remember, I just mentioned one type of way of life, that's a fishery.
Yeah, it's a nomadic life too, right? Like whatever there's a water, they will take the vehicle and then they move their animals for wherever they can find water, and at the same time they wake up. And they're fishermen, Afar fishermen. They were able to move along Red Sea, and that's one of their livelihoods, right? Catching fish and selling. So that movement is restricted today. So
not only restricted, it's dangerous.
But
they have been.
It's dangerous. Yeah,
they have
I heard the stories of so many people. Yeah, I've heard stories of fishermen getting killed at the same time, right?
Absolutely.
So
Yes.
yeah,
So this is one of the things. It's perhaps for American diplomat, it's an inconvenience. He cannot go from one place to another. But for us, it has been a life and death. I mean, I just mentioned the Afar fisherman. And just imagine if you're a far a fisherman with a family of six. You know, he's the only source of income. He wants to go to the sea. He wants to feed his family, and he was shot at, and he's being kidnapped from the sea. And this is what the refugees who have been talking in Ethiopia, for example. There's about 57 or 60,000 Afar refugees who are Eritrean Afar refugees who've been registered, and most of them were displaced, forcibly displaced because of this violence. Remember, the Afar is do not have farm, and the Red Sea is their farm. Unlike to those who are in the highlands, perhaps they're freely to farm their farms, the farmlands. They have ways of feeding their family, but this is the only source of income for the Afar people, and they have been systematically killed while they're trying to carry on their traditional way of life they have been doing for the past 3,000 years. So this is a thing when it comes to foreign diplomats can really expose these things. But we've been saying this for years and years. It's quite depressing to speak about these things day after the day. But we need some kind of uh, unity and elusive unity for those who are in the opposition force has been like what I just said, lack of understanding of the grievances of their fellow Eritreans. You know, not because only because of the tyrannical system in the country, like Isaias Afwerki and his military junta, but to those of Eritreans who are sympathizers and supporters in diaspora. We have just seen what happened in these festivals in Europe and the states that the Eritrean regime has sponsored. You know, the Eritrean youth, and mainly from the opposition group, have came against it, and they were able to stop these festivals in Europe. This is great work. But in terms of the
yeah,
political unity, that's what we're lacking. The political opposition groups need to come to terms that this is a regime that is historically being since its inception has been led by Tigrinya supremacist ideology, and this ideology needs to change. This is what we are saying as ethnic indigenous minority groups, those who have ethnic grievances, those who have religious grievances. You know, the common understanding, the common principles are what is missing, and this is where we need to start in the transitional constitutional model that respects all of our rights. Unless we have that understanding, we're never going to be united, and the future of Eritrea is bleak. And the more we do that, the more that tyrannical system will exist and oppress its people.
saying is like all the like opposition groups have to come together and agree that the minorities right is not respected. We really don't want the status quo of what's happening right now, right? Like mostly led by Tigrinya Orthodoxes,
Yeah,
and they all like the power is in the hand of the few, right? Like very few people, but they still like a what's
yeah,
happening is one ethnic group is dominating over everybody,
yeah.
even though they like the country is being dominated by one man, but he
The
empowers his
system,
people to
the
dominate
system.
the system. The
It's
system.
not a one
Okay.
man. Even if we were to remove Isaias tonight or tomorrow, the system will remain. That's what we need to discuss. The problem is not just
Yeah.
the ruling class, but the system. Unless the system is changed and accommodates all these grievances from today, we are going to have problems. We cannot, let alone for tomorrow, but we're having problem as opposition groups today because we cannot understand the gravity and the nature of the regime. If you say this is a
We
regime that,
need. I'm
yeah,
sorry. I'm interrupting.
yeah,
So
if we
we
say,
need ethnic, sometimes ethnic federalism, federal
well,
system.
well,
The Afars and other minorities are pushing
well,
for.
this is what we are promoting as ethnic group who has ethnic grievances and are being the victims of ethnic crimes. This is what we are proposing, but we are not saying this will work for everyone. But the point I was trying to make is that the Eritrean opposition groups need to understand, open their mind, first of all, to these grievances. This is one message. The other thing is that keeps coming. I mentioned the idea of removing the regime first when it comes to, and the other thing that we've been seeing from our fellow Tigrinya uh, groups is that look, this is not a Tigrinya friendly regime. We understand what they're saying. They're talking about, you know, the flood of young Tigrinya speakers leaving the country. But what they're missing is not just the numbers, but what we're talking about the system. When we talk about the system is, even though, like I just gave you an example, Dankalia, you see my poster says Dankalia not for sale. This means the regime is not only uh, uh, assimilating the Afar, but selling its our land, selling our territories to the likes of the United Arab Emirates and those of the foreign multinational corporation like the the Australian mining giant. So all of this is to say that we are talking about the systematic way of oppressing other nationalities, other ethnic groups. This is where we are don't see eye to eye. I mean, the nature of the regime, yes, it is um, equal opportunity oppressor when you look at national military service, when you look at human rights abuses, specifically related to, you know, all of these crimes that United Nations have talked about. But deep inside, if you dive deep inside, you will see the crimes going layer 2, 3 layers down. We're talking about those who lost their ethnic identity, those who are losing their language, those who are losing their land and resources, those who are losing our customary laws. We are not even,
Represented.
we do not even have a way to speak our language freely. This is what we're talking about. Those, in case the Eritrean regime were to be removed tomorrow, those who are in diaspora, they still continue to practice their language at home because the national newspaper is in Tigrinya, national television is in Tigrinya, national defense is in Tigrinya dominated. You know, the government is dominated by all of it is in advantage of the Tigrinya ethnic uh, status quo is going to be remained. This is what we need to challenge those of our freedom-loving democratic opposition groups to listen to the grievances of the Afar and others. This, in fact, is not to, like you said, to take away anybody's right, but this is the only way we can coexist. We cannot live in a country such as Eritrea, dominated and assimilated by one group. And this is a friendly advice now. But once the regime is removed, this could get violence. Why would take on these kind of chances while we are in the democratic nations? We live in this democratic nations who protect and you know and agrees to these kind of multinational existence in Europe and United Nations and a federal system that accommodates all these different nationalities.
Yeah, what you're saying is let's agree on that right now, like before we, well, when the regime is removed,
Yeah.
then we might really like we might have like a hard time later on. We might lead to the conflict and everything. So let's solve those issues among the opposition right now, so we won't have to do it like once the dictatorship is gone, then
Hmm.
we don't want to have the same problem of like one ethnic group dominating.
Well, listen,
So
the example is all around us. Look at Ethiopia right now. The problem that's going on in Ethiopia, for example, is similar problem that they do not want to go back to the ideologies and the domination of one ethnic group, the Amhara, the Melilik type. All Ethiopia is represented by one group, and this is what the Oromos, the Tigrayans, the Somalis, the Sidamas, and the Afar, all of these people are striving to achieve. And what they have achieved, protecting their statehood, protecting their ethnic identities. And this is what Eritreans, such as the Afar, want. You know, the equality of nationality would not diminish statehood of Eritrea or compromise the sovereignty of Eritrea. This is what the opposition needs to understand. Yeah.
to other people's position, it's what happened. Like I heard the stories of what happened in Kenya, because every time they had election, they were having issues before, like violence and all that stuff, and then they tried to search for the root cause of this. And then, so when they looked at it, most of the civil service was dominated by one ethnic group. So the issue was really deeper than that. It wasn't just about who won the election or who lost the election, but the system in general. So they discussed these issues, and then they trying to solve it, and they really their hiring process and everything they're really changing right now. So,
Hmm.
and they're moving towards a real democracy is
Absolutely.
what I'm trying to
Uh,
say. So
Absolutely.
when you don't like right now, like you say, you brought example of Ethiopia, it was been dominated for maybe centuries by one group, and then you can see right now the same group is trying to dominate again, and it causing all these issues for everybody. So I think
the
you're right when you say let's discuss this among the opposition right now,
Mhm.
and let's come to terms with the grievances of minorities and respecting minority rights. So
Well,
we
it's
will
in
run
favor.
to this issue.
It's in their favor. This is what I'm trying to say.
It's in
It's not
everybody's
something
favor.
that it's not something that they
I
give
agree with you.
the other nationalities because of from the being nice to these nationalities, but it's in the interest of Eritrea. If we Eritrea
Eh,
were to survive as a nation, as many of these people who always say we need to protect the rights and sovereignties and the identity of Eritrea. Okay, well, we agree on that. But what we're saying is, uh, you have to really understand. For example, I know Shahim, you and I are about the same age. When we were in ASAP, at the time of liberation struggle, the Eritrean Tigrinyas that we're talking about today were completely marginalized or persecuted because they were to be assimilated because into Amhara culture, and they in fact the Eritrean Tigrinyas have rejected that, and we supported those principles for the Tigrinyas not to be dominated by Amharic culture. This is exactly what we're saying. Today, the page has turned from the Amhara to Tigrinya, and Tigrinya is assimilating the Afar and the Kunamas and others. This is we only have to go back 30 years back to revisit this reality. And this reality is going to compromise the sovereignty of Eritrea more than anything, not from foreign powers, not other nations coming to colonize Eritrea again. This is because of the lack of understanding, lack of, in fact, being selfish amongst the Eritrean elites, the Tigrinya elites that are opposing us, in seeing Eritrea to be a multi-ethnic, multi religious, diverse state. You know, this is where the problem is, and in fact, this is the only way. And the irony here is the ideologists or the extremist groups that are want to dominate against us. For example, you know, I don't want to pick on the Amhara in Ethiopia. This is way out of our boundaries. But the Amharas who are wants to see Ethiopia go back to its 300 years of dominating other cultures are in cahoot in relations with the Eritrean regime as we speak. And they are promoting this one nation, one country to advance their ideology in Eritrea, and as well as in Amhara version of Ethiopia. So we have to really, those of us who want to see the continuation of Eritrea beyond the current system, beyond this regime, need to really understand and address this issue today.
Yeah, if we solve, I think it's good for everybody, not only for Eritrean minorities like Afar, but the Tigrinyas or the majorities. It's good. I mean, we all have, because we all share the same border, and then we all have to live together. So we have to come to some kind of accommodation on how to do that, you know. And I totally agree with you, Mr. Ahmed. And if you want to add anything else, you're welcome.
No, I just want to go back to the article that you started with. It's totally surprising coming from the American diplomat. Like I said, he probably not the views are not openly supported by the U.S. administration, but UN administration is already know what is going on in the country. Number one, in the nature of the regime. Number two, isolation is a way to go. Whether this isolation means more sanctions on Eritrea, or it means supporting the democratic opposition to remove this cancerous regime from the region, not only from Eritrea, but it's bad for the region. You know, and this regime is inviting the likes of Russians and China and others who care less about human rights and displacement and prolonging the lives of tyrants all over Africa. So it is in the best interest of the United States to support groups like us and those who want to see this country is genuinely transformed to a transitional democracy from tyranny. You know, this message goes not only to the State Department, but also to the European Unions and everyone that wants to see this regime gone for good and the rights of Eritrean people respected. Thank you, Shehim, for this discussion, and I really appreciate your time in bringing this article.
Thank you, Mr. Ahmed. Thank you. I'm looking forward to do it again. Thank you very much, Mr. Ahmed. And that was our discussion for today, folks. And until we meet with a similar program next time, thank you. Thank you for watching us, and have a good day. Bye-bye. Thanks again. All right.
Malera noya,